In this video, we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, we're going to talk about the most important direction, about the Pokrovsk agglomeration, where the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense and to improve their position significantly. During the previous nights, the Russians published additional changes on the ground, and pro-Ukraine resources confirmed this progress on the ground as well. So the situation, the picture that you can see in front of your screens is the situation by the morning of the 12th of August of 2025. And telling the truth, right before we start making this video, we got additional batch of updates from the Pokrovsk direction, which we will discuss in details right now during this video, but the changes we will add probably by the end of this day of the 12th of August, and we will discuss them additional changes during the next video. So first, let's talk about the changes that were published during the night. According to pro-Ukrainian resources, the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense in the area of the settlements of Zolotoy Kolodezh and the settlement of Vesole. So this is the map that during the previous 12 hours was provided by pro-Ukrainian mappers of Deep State team. So as you can see, the Russians indeed managed to break through Ukrainian defense and to improve their positions significantly. So according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, during the previous 12 hours, the Russians managed to take under complete control the villages or to outflank the settlements of Zolotoy Kolodezh, to Kotsin Cauldron, the village by the name of Kucherov Yar, and to answer the village of Vesole. Once again, this information was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian resources. But this is not the most important thing. Also, I would like to point your attention to the gray zone that was also added by pro-Ukrainian resources. According to this gray zone, the armored force of the Russian Federation managed to outflank the settlement of Zolotoy Kolodezh and to move even further in the northwestern and the northeastern direction. And according to pro-Ukrainian resources, there are very heavy clashes for the settlements of Petrivka and the settlement of Nova Vodiane. So, and we can confirm this information by probably this video that was published by the Russian sources, and in this video we can see how Russians were FPV droning positions of the armored force of Ukraine on the territory of Novodiana. And as you can see, the Russians were attacking this territory with FPV drones. Obviously, there is no need to attack this territory with FPV drone. For example, if your forces are located somewhere in the vicinity of the settlement of Novoekonomichny and Pokrovsk, there is one reason to attack this building with FPV drone so far from the area that was confirmed by different geolocations and by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, only in case if you're advancing in this direction. So the situation is very critical for the armored force of Ukraine. The Russians established complete control over this territory with drones, with artillery, with FABs. In this video we can see attack on Ukraine warehouse or ammo depot with the use of Geran type of drone. Furthermore, pro-Ukrainian resources published a very interesting update, and this information was published once again by very reliable pro-Ukrainian resource. The Dobropolye-Kramatorsk highway has been cut and is under Russian control in the area of the Novodiane settlement. So according to this author, the Russians managed to cut this T0514 road in the vicinity of the settlement of Novodiana. So this update also confirms that the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to cross this road physically and currently are on the outskirts of the settlements of Petrikovka and Novodiana. So the situation once again for the Ukrainians is very critical. Furthermore, several pro-Russian resources reported that Ukrainians announced the evacuation of the settlement by the name of Sergeyevka, which is located much deeper inside of the territory of Ukraine in the northeastern direction. So we're talking about this village. So which means that Ukrainians are going to use this settlement first of all to concentrate their troops and forces with the purpose to stabilize the situation and not to allow the Russians to attack the armored force of Ukraine in the Kramatorsk-Konstantinovka direction from behind. So this is the main purpose. But it seems that this will not help the Ukrainians to stabilize the situation. It's just a waste of time. So once again, this update, for example, once again was published by pro-Ukrainian resources, and this is the situation by the morning of the 12th of August of 2025. But as I told you at the beginning of this video, right before we started making this video, several very reliable pro-Russian resources made additional changes and made additional statements about the situation in this area. We will add changes before the next video, but now let's discuss them in details. So according to several pro-Russian resources, very reliable once again, the armored force of the Russian Federation managed to improve their positions to the north of the city of Pokrovsk, and pro-Russian resources reported that several groups of the armed force of the Russian Federation were discovered on the eastern outskirts of the settlement of Novoalexandriivka. This is very important report because if this information is correct, this means that the Russians, as a result of this offensive operation, managed to cut one of the most important lines that Ukrainians still probably they used to supply and support their contingent on the territory of the city of Pokrovsk. So if this information is correct, most likely the Ukrainians were completely caught and cold on the territory of the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration. Furthermore, the same sources are saying that the Russians attacked the village of Shevchenka, and currently there are very heavy clashes for this settlement. Furthermore, the armed force of the Russian Federation began assault operation in the direction of the settlement of Svetlae. So summarizing everything, this is approximately the area of probably a work of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group who are currently trying to advance to the north of the city of Pokrovsk. Furthermore, the same source reported that the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Novodonbass, and currently there are very heavy clashes for this territory as well. Furthermore, the armed force of the Russian Federation by the morning of the 12th of August of 2025 managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Rubezhne. There are still very heavy clashes for the settlement of Zolotoy Kolodez. The Ukrainians managed to introduce additional reinforcements and reserves in this area with the purpose to stabilize the situation between the villages of Gruzskaya, Veselaya, and Zolotoy Kolodez. According to pro-Russian resources, the armed forces of the Ukraine, who are currently located in the area of the settlement of Kucherev Yar, were caught and cooled by the Russians without any chances for evacuation. So let's summarize the western and the northern flanks. According to everything that we have just discussed, the sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armed forces of the Russian Federation currently are operating in this area as well, to the west and to the northwest of the area of breakthrough. Furthermore, the sources reported that currently the Russians intensify their activities in the eastern direction with the purpose to break through Ukrainian defense and to secure the villages of Shakhova and the villages of Shakhova, Vladimirovka, and the settlement of Sofiivka, which is located on the way to the city of Drushkovka, which is a part of Drushkovka-Konstantinovka agglomeration. So this is another area of huge Russian activity, more precisely of Russia's sabotage and reconnaissance group. So this is approximately the, let's say, polygon or the area of the Russian breakthrough. And this breakthrough, this information confirms several things. First of all, the settlement of Rodinska. About Rodinska, another important piece of news. According to information we have, the Russians almost established complete control over the settlement of Krasny Liman, and the Russians managed to answer the settlement of Rodinska from the east. So they managed to dig in deeper along Pushkina Street. So this is also very important because if this information is correct, this means that the Russians managed to establish complete control, or at least to cut and cauldron the armed forces of Ukraine who are currently located on the Rodinskaya mine. So this is approximately, once again, the area of Russian breakthrough, and based on this we can make a conclusion that the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the Pokrovsk agglomeration were caught and cooled by the armed forces of the Russian Federation by the morning of the 12th of August of 2025, or about to be caught and cooled during the next several days. Furthermore, the Russians continue their breakthrough in the northern direction. We see that the Russians are not going to stop. The sources are saying that the main plan of the Russians is to cut in pincers the settlement of Dobropolye as well, through the village of Belozerskaya. So the Russians don't want to destroy every single town and city in this area, and they prefer to take them, to cut them in corners, to encircle them, and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. It's very important, and it's a vital question for the Russians to save buildings, to save constructions that can be used in the future for concentration of additional forces before moving further deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. As for the Konstantinovka direction, during the previous 24 hours, the most important updates we got, as you can see, from the settlement Ivanopolia. During the previous night, lots of geolocations were published exactly from this area, and as you can see, the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours either made an attempt to counterattack Russian positions in the area of the settlement of Kliban-Byk with the purpose to unblock encircled Ukrainian forces, or in this video we can see how Ukrainians were running away from the settlement of Kliban-Byk trying to escape the encirclement that they were caught in during the previous days. So this is the only probably interesting update from the Konstantinovka direction. And few more words about the Liman or the southern Kupiansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, according to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Kolodezi. Most likely today or tomorrow, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians improved their positions once again in the area of the settlements of Shandrigolova and Seredina. Additional positions were taken, and from this, based on this configuration of the line of combat contact, we can make a conclusion that most likely the resistance of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area collapsed completely, and they are also about to fall back from this territory further in the southern directions towards the settlement of Novoselovka and Robusheva. When talking about the central Kupiansk direction, the most important updates are coming from the settlement of Zeleny Gai. Today, pro-Russian resources published this video where we can see how the armored forces of the Russian Federation were freely walking along the village and waving with the Russian flag and with the sign of the unit that was responsible for offensive operation in this direction. So this video confirms that as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to take under complete control the village of Zeleny Gai, and that the Russians are ready to move further in the western direction towards the cities and the villages in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Barova. So we see that the front line in the central Kupiansk direction also collapses under the pressure of the armored forces of the Russian Federation. Now let's discuss several important statements that were made during the previous night. There is no sign that the Russians have received signals to prepare for a post-war situation. Not yet. On the contrary, they're moving their troops and forces in such a way as to launch new offensive operations. Today, these words were heard in the evening briefing of the President of Ukraine. So Zelensky is trying to tell us that most likely the summit in Alaska will not resolve anything. Most likely he is trying to tell us that he himself personally and the European countries will reject any agreement that will be achieved by the President of the United States of America and the President of the Russian Federation on the territory of Alaska. Most likely Donald Trump and Putin will sign something like a draft of agreement or real agreement between the United States of America and the Russian Federation regarding peaceful settlement of the conflict of Ukraine, which will most likely be signed in Russian favor. And this agreement will be rejected by Zelensky and the European allies, and which will allow Russia to continue offensive operation with the purpose to force Zelensky and the European countries to recognize agreements that most likely the Russians and the United States of America will achieve during the summit on the territory of Alaska. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.